Yes, Raniji, we will get started and I will start the recording.
Namaste, Brandan ji. Oh. Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Shri Saraswatyai Namaha. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Sahana Vavatu. Sahana Bhunaktu. Sahaviryam Karavavahai. Tejasvinavadhitamastu. Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om.
Thank you, Raniji. I will take the opportunity to just talk a little bit because there are many people who have joined are new to us. So, So thank you everyone for joining back, and as well as the new faces. So welcome to our group. We just want to take few minutes of your time to talk about who we are, and talk a little bit about Brandan before we get started. And the Asha Jyotish organization is a non-profit organization, and been here for I will say the roots has been there for 30 years. While we started in 2020 with the idea of having this engagement of Jyotish Kumbh, which comes every year, and the great presentations happens while we are back again for the next year. So given that in mind, we wanted to make sure we have our own year engagement, and we did that, and it's very nicely accepted by the group. So we have, as you must have been seeing as you are coming in, we had many great astrologers which has made presentations with us, and which you can see the names down there. So a lot of Jyotish, but at the same time, Ayurveda is also one of our specialties. So we do have a courses of Vastu and Ayurveda on our platform. And actually the Ayurveda is much more popular over here. So, and the presentation which we are going to make is a combination of Ayurveda and Jyotish. So, really looking forward to that. So with that, I will quickly move on to Brandan presentation, and just and these are the few things which I was referring in the chat box for the people, in terms of medical relief for India is like there's a challenge going on, especially related to Dr. Charak's organization. So there are things which, we need your help in spreading the message. That's what you see. And I will move on to the Brandan. So it's a very special presentation which is there with us is the Brandan's, and Brandan has been a well teacher and a writer in the Jyotish and the Ayurveda and in the area of Washington DC, and it has presented in many international conferences on Ayurveda and on the Jyotish in the US and the Europe area. So, and he has his own website called vpfeeley.com, and he has been associated with Nama for very long. So, not taking a lot of the time over here, I would like to move on and let Brandan have the presentation. So, Brandan, it's all yours. I will stop sharing. Brandan, are you? Do you like to open your video and can get started? I see a little bit of pause here. Yes. Brendan, can you hear us? You are muted, Brendan. Give us a minute. Looks like you're Brendan.
Hello?
Yes. Yes, Brendan, can you hear us?
Okay, I can hear you now. Yeah, I can hear you, yes.
Yes. So you can switch on your video as well, because you could see that you switched on the video and it got off right now.
My video
And
is off.
yes.
Okay, so let's see what I do. Start video, okay.
Yes.
Can you see me
We
now?
can see you. Yes, we can see you now. Little bit adjustment of the video so that we can see you full. We could
Hold on a
see your
second.
eyes. Slightly will be good. And we can see that you have started sharing your presentation. Thank you.
Let's see now. Well, you tell me when to start.
Yes, you can get started, Brendan.
I see. So thank you for inviting me. And today I want to talk about Jyotish and Ayurveda. I want to talk about the integration of these two subjects because it's a wonderful topic. And I practice both Jyotish and Ayurveda. I've been practicing Ayurveda since the late 90s. And so I use both of them in my practice. You know, when I do Jyotish, I'm doing Ayurveda. And when I'm doing Ayurveda, I'm looking at Jyotish. So I like to integrate the two. And what I want to do today is present the fundamental building blocks of these two subjects so we can develop an approach as to how we look at a chart from an Ayurvedic point of view. Now, first of all, what is disease? We need to understand what is disease and what causes disease. And according to the Vedas, according to Ayurveda, pragyaparada, which is the failure of intelligence. It's the failure of an intelligent relationship with the world, an intelligent relationship with our own nature. That's what causes disease. In other words, if we're not able to process the world and process our responses to the world, our reactions to the world, then that gives rise to this failure of intelligence. We're not looking at it intelligently. So we breach the natural order of life. And so this results in the accumulation of emotions and memories and lead to what we call the Shadripu, 6 weaknesses. So what are the Shadripu? The Shadripu are Kama, Krodha, Lopa, Moha, Matsarya, and Madha. So each of the planets, the Shadripus are ruled by the corresponding planets. So when we talk about Kama, we're talking about desire. And Venus rules over Kama. And of course, you know, what happens in life is we have desires, and many of them remain unfulfilled. Some of them are fulfilled, but we get disappointed and we get disillusioned. And in the extreme, we can become very depressed. And many people will give up, and many people will commit suicide. So, and that all happens because we're not able to fulfill our desires. And you know that Saturn and Rahu are said to be natural buttocks. You see? So a buttock is a planet that obstructs you. And Saturn and Rahu in the natural zodiac, and I'm talking about the natural zodiac, but you consider Aries as the Lagna. Saturn and Rahu rule the 11th house. And the 11th house is a Kamashana. And it's got to do with the fulfillment of desire. Therefore, Saturn and Rahu, the purpose really is to block us, to make sure that we have appropriate desires. And we don't like that. So Saturn and Rahu are planets. Venus gives rise to that desire or rules over that desire because it's the Lord of the 7th house. But Saturn and Rahu are the planets that tend to cause all the problems for us in this world. They're Tamaguna planets. Then we've got Krodha, anger. And Mars is the planet that rules over this particular Chadra. And so, because anger, they say, comes from fear. According to the Bhagavad Gita, anger comes from fear. And anger arises because we become disillusioned and we become dissatisfied, again, because we haven't fulfilled our desires. And then this greed, Rahu, Lopa. And Rahu is never satisfied. The Rahu part of us can never get enough. You see, we always want more. And this gives rise to many, many problems. And then we've got this moha, it's called passion. Ketu is a very, very passionate planet. You see, but he rules over what you might call illusion. See, Ketu is the planet that rules mistakes. You see, he's the planet that rules all our mistakes. We make false judgments. We come to false conclusions. We have false expectations. These are all because of, because the mind is delusional. And of course, Ketu is the planet that gives rise to moksha. And participating in all this makes us question ourselves, you see? It makes us examine our own mind, examine our own nature. Who am I and what do I want? And then you've got Mercury, jealousy, Matsarya. And then Saturn is the planet that rules addiction, alcohol, and addiction. So whichever planets influence the 6th house, because the 6th house is said to be the house of disease. It's the house where the enemies hang out. Whichever planet rules the 6th house or has a strong influence on the 6th house will give rise to that particular Shadripu. You see, we will suffer from that particular Shadripu. Now, so all of these give rise to certain weaknesses in human character, and we call this psychology. So there's a list there. Everybody's familiar with this. There's selfishness, there's untruthful speech, there's improper behavior, there's fear, there's greed, there's anger and hatred, the suppression of the natural urges, suppression of emotions, excessive stimulation, overindulgence, sexuality, or any other activity, and just the incorrect use of therapies. Now, you will notice that the Sattvic grahas did not rule over any of the Shadripus. So you got the 3 gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And the Sun, Moon, and Jupiter are Sattvic planets, you see? And they didn't rule over any of the Shadripus. Mercury and Venus are Rajasic planets. And Mars, Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu are Tamasic planets. And in Ayurveda, we say that disease is caused by Tamaguna. And we know in Jyotish that the serious diseases happen because of Mars, Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu. these tamasic grahas. And any of the other planets can take on some of these tamasic influences. Like if the sun and moon are badly afflicted by these tamasic grahas, or become agents of these tamasic grahas, by dispositorship, by aspects, because they rule certain houses, because every house has its own karika, then they too can become agents of disease. So, Ayurveda is an Upaveda, or Upa Anga. It's a limb of the Vedas, but it's a subordinate limb of the Vedas. Jyotish is a Vedanga, and according to Shushrut, Brahma is the author of this great subject. In other words, it came from God himself. So, there are three entities in this creation, three eternal entities. There's God, the soul, and there's Maya. They are all eternal. So it's how the soul relates to these entities that determines what happens in our lives. See, the soul is identified with Maya, or the mind is identified with Maya and overwhelms the soul, and therefore the soul becomes trapped in this world. But the real longing of the soul is for that divine experience. That's its nature. Its nature is divine. But the soul and Maya are subordinate to God. So now, the knowledge of Sankhya philosophy is very important in this subject. And in fact, I think it'd be very hard to do a good job of reading the Vedas or even reading the Gita if you didn't have a knowledge of Sankhya philosophy. It's said to be a materialistic philosophy because it describes the manifest aspect of creation. And according to Rishi Kapila is the origin of this Sankhya philosophy. There are 24 cosmic principles that describe the manifest universe. And this Sankhya philosophy, you can read it in chapter 13 of Gita. It's also covered in the Bhagavatam. And according to Sankhya, there's Purusha and Prakriti. And we could say, from the point of view of Jyotish, that the sun is Purusha and the moon is Prakriti. So Purusha is the experiencer, and Prakriti is that which is experienced. So it's like self and other. It's the male and female principle of creation. In the Gita, it describes it as the field and the knower of the field. So there is Purusha with a capital P, but there are innumerable Purushas, small p's. So it's a dualistic system of philosophy, but it's different than the Western system of dualism, because in the West, it's about the mind-body problem. You see, Sankhya is about that which is manifest and that which is unmanifest. So it goes a lot deeper than the Western system of dualism. So what is this Prakriti? Prakriti is the world of nature, and it's everything that comes into manifestation. Now, we have a tendency to think that nature is the grass and the fields and the trees. But nature is also the moon and the fixed stars and everything that's up there in the cosmos. That's all manifestation. That's all part of manifestation. So Prakriti is said to be the womb of creation. The one that desires to become many is the multiplicity. So Prakriti is said to be the mother of all the universe, and the universe is her child. But Prakriti evolves according to the three gunas: Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And these three gunas are often likened to potential energy, kinetic energy, and inertia. In other words, Sattva guna is our pure potential. Rajaguna is all that energy that drives us into activity. And Tamaguna is resistance. Resistance to experience. You see, in our relationships, when that Tamaguna comes up, it gives rise to tremendous resistance. Resistance to relating, and it destroys relationships. So all this confusion, disease that arise are a result of the mind being identified with Prakriti, with Maya Prakriti, identified with the manifest world, and this is what gives rise to all this disease business. Now, the first manifestation of Purusha and Prakriti is Mahat. And Mahat is that which is great. It's the first evolution of creation. It's the first manifest principle. So Mahat is a kind of a collective intelligence, contains all the individual buddhis or intellects. So what this is telling us is that everything in creation is intelligent. It doesn't matter where you look in creation, you will find a systematic order of things. You'll find an intelligence structured in the subject. And this is why no matter what subject we do research in, we find this intelligence in the subject. In the human mind, it's called buddhi, and buddhi is the discriminative faculty in the mind. It's got to do with knowing the difference between what is right and what is wrong, that which is right and that which is wrong, or that which is real and that which is unreal. So this intelligence exists in every cell of the human body, in every organ of the human body, in every thought and feeling. There's an intelligent reason for those thoughts and feelings. So, and the flow of that intelligence is the flow of prana. And prana is the life force itself. And you see, when things stop working in the human body, it's because the flow of prana has been obstructed. The flow of intelligence in that particular organ system has been obstructed. And that gives rise to disease. And those planets that give rise to the Shadripus are the planets that are causing this. See? Because they give rise to that the blockage of the flow of prana in the body. So ego, which is the art former, according to Ayurveda, disease has its origin in the ego. And so the ego is the problem. And of course, all the spiritual teachings tell us that we have to surrender this ego, and we practice meditation and contemplation in order to work with this ego, because it gets us in trouble if we promote it. So this ahamkar. But the ego has a purpose also, because it gives us a sense of identity. But it's a question as to whether it's a healthy ego or unhealthy ego. And that ego manifests in terms of the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. Now, this term prakriti in the textbooks in Ayurveda is used to describe the constitution of the individual. It's the genetic makeup that is unique to each individual and is expressed in terms of the gunas. And the tattvas are a further manifestation of the gunas. So the 5 elements. And so you've got the 3 gunas and you've got the 5 elements of the Pancha tattvas. And this gives rise to the constitution of the individual, because where we're trying to get to is we want to understand our own constitution. We want to be able to interpret the chart so we can describe our own constitution and see the weaknesses in our own constitution, if there are any. Now, so you've got manas prakriti, and that's the property of the mind. And generally, that's described in terms of sattva, rajas, and tamas. And you got deha prakriti. Deha is the body, and deha prakriti is the physical attributes, and that's often described in terms of the doshas. But each of the doshas, vata, pitta, and kapha, can be described in terms of the 3 gunas as well, because sattvic vata dosha or sattvic pitta dosha and sattvic kapha dosha is going to be very different than tamasic vata dosha, tamasic pitta dosha, and tamasic kapha dosha. So the gunas are always involved. So the tattvas are the building blocks of the body. An affliction to these tattvas give rise to flaws to the constitution. So it is said that the mind itself is a manifestation of the tattvas, but they represent all the processes in the body. Now, what are the 5 tattvas, the Pancha tattvas? You've got Akash, which is ruled by Jupiter. So Akash is the very environment, the very space we live in. It's our capacity to feel connected. You see, Jupiter is guru. And so a great teacher or a great guru has got a very good Jupiter, because he creates a lovely space. He or she creates a lovely space for people to be around. And Jupiter is the most spiritual planet. So it gives that sense of connection, well-being. So an afflicted Jupiter, you see, can give you a sense of isolation. An afflicted Jupiter can give rise to a feeling of disconnectedness, a lack of relationship. And if there isn't that relationship, then the space can become toxic. You see, you'll hear a lot these days about toxic environments. The space itself, the work environment can become toxic. The home environment can become toxic. The whole atmosphere can become toxic. And that's got to do with this Jupiter, Akash Tattva. Then you've got Vayu Tattva. And the air element, or Vayu, is ruled by Shani. And Vayu has got to do with the flow of prana, all movement in the body, whether it's voluntary or involuntary. All movement, even the flow through the senses and the perception by the 5 senses, that's all ruled by Vata dosha, or the air element, or Vayu Tattva. Then Agni. Agni is extremely important. This fire element has got to do with digestion, our capacity to break down our food into its bioavailable components so that it can be utilized by the body. But Agni is not just about the physical chemical digestion process. It's also about digesting life experiences. It's about digesting mental and emotional experiences. You see, it's about, because Agni gives rise to knowledge and gives rise to learning and gives rise to understanding. And Agni, the fire element, you see, has got to do with vision. It's got to do with the capacity to see into the future, or to create a future, and to have a vision for the future, and have a vision for your destiny. This is all part of Agni Tattva. And if Agni is weak in your constitution, you see, if your Agni is strong, you get up in the morning and you're full of enthusiasm. It's a new day. The sun has risen. And so Agni gives us that kind of enthusiasm to participate in life and to live life. It gives us a vision of the future. So Agni has got to do with all transformational or enzymatic processes in the body. If your Agni is weak, it creates a tremendous amount of dullness in the nature. You see? Then you've got the water element, Jala Tattva, and it's ruled by Venus. So that water element is responsible for all the biochemical and hormonal processes in the body. And if you open up any book on anatomy and physiology, the first paragraph will tell you that hormones are messengers. And so these hormones have a lot got to do with relationship. That's the water element. The Jala Tattva also has to do with the transportation of oxygen and all the nutrients to the cells, the tissues and organs. And it rules over the blood and the plasma and the lymph. So any disorder too, Jala Tattva is going to give rise to disorders for these aspects of one's health. Then there's the earth element, Mercury. Mercury is Prithvi Tattva. And so Prithvi has got to do with structure. It's got to do with, having one's feet in the ground, stability. And it rules over the bones and the skin and the nails and the hair and the teeth. So these elements are further condensed into 3 doshas. This is what the rishis observed, that these 5 elements, the Panchatattva and the 3 gunas, are further condensed into 3 doshas. And these constitute the mind and the physical body and all the physiological process in this body. And when the doshas become imbalanced, the doshas are referred to as Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And when the doshas become imbalanced through either improper diet or incorrect lifestyle or lack of understanding even, or if they're disturbed because of traumatic experiences, then various diseases and mental disturbances manifest. So what do the imbalanced doshas do? They destroy the tissues of the body, they destroy the dhatus. The dhatus, there are 7 dhatus, and disease begins to manifest. So this is what happens in this body when these doshas go out of balance. So what does Vata dosha rule over? It's got to do with the nervous system and the senses, and especially got to do with movement, so the motor system. It's also got to do with the assimilation of the nutrients. In other words, if you've got a Vata imbalance in your small intestine, it's called Samanavayu, then you might have a malabsorption problem. You're not absorbing the nutrients from the body because samana vayu is impaired. So it's also got to do with the removal of wastes in the body, because wastes accumulate in this body, toxins accumulate in this body. And it's because of an obstruction to Vata dosha that these toxins or wastes accumulate in the body, and we're not able to get rid of them. So everything that's got to do with movement in the body is governed by Vata dosha. So you've got breathing, you've got the movement of the eyelids, the muscles, tissues, the heart. Fear, anxiety are the main emotions related to Vata dosha, but it also rolls over pain, tremors, spasms. And Vata accumulates in the small intestine, in the bones, in the urinary bladder, the kidneys, the brain, and the ears. These are referred to as the seat of Vata dosha. Pitta dosha governs over our metabolism and all the psychophysiological processes. So it's, Pitta people have a very sharp mind. So Vata people tend to have a very restless mind, full of fear and anxiety. Pitta people have a very sharp mind, very intelligent people they're said to be, because Pitta governs a lot got to do with that mental emotional process and the capacity to process our emotions and feelings. So it rules over hunger as well as thirst. So it governs all the digestive process. So Pitta resides in the small intestine, but also in the blood, the liver, the gallbladder, the spleen, the heart, uterus, sweat glands, the skin, and the eyes. Whereas primary location is going to be in the small intestine and the liver and the gallbladder. And then Kapha dosha gives rise to structure, solidity, stability, and nourishment. And so all the secretions in the body are governed by this Kapha dosha. All the secretions, the mucous membranes, the joints. So it's found in the chest. It's the mucus in the body, you see? That mucus layer that's in the body that protects and lubricates the movement. So it's in the chest, the stomach, the lungs, fatty tissue, the sinuses, the nasal passages, the lymphatic system, pancreas, joints, plasma, and mucus secretions. Now, what we want to see is what are the correspondences between these doshas and the rashis and the grahas. Now, Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. And I'm using the designation given here by Prashara and some other of the ancient books. They correspond to Pitta dosha. In other words, they are fire signs, and they correspond to Pitta dosha. Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn are classified as Vata dosha rashis. And that might be counterintuitive because Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn are earth signs. But from my experience, these correspondences are valid. In other words, I've seen Taurians who've got a Vata constitution. And so then you got Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius or tri-doshi. They've got all three doshas in them. And the way I interpret this, now, I've heard people saying that, if you've got a planet in Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, then it gives rise to a tri-doshic imbalance. I disagree with that. Because if you've got Saturn in Gemini, Libra, or Aquarius, let's say, in a tri-doshic rashi, it will give rise to those rashis take on the quality of their association, just like Mercury takes on the quality of its association. So if Mercury is with Mars, then it takes on the quality of Mars. And likewise, these tridoshi rashis will take on the quality of the planets that influence them. And then you've got Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. They're Kapha dosha rashis. And they're full of water, of course. And Kapha is primarily water, but also earth, the earth element. Now, so then there's subdoshas. So, in other words, there's secondary doshas, you could say. So you might say that Aries, you see, Aries is going to be Pitta Pitta, Leo maybe Pitta Vata, and Sagittarius Pitta Kapha. Or Taurus might be Vata Kapha, Virgo is Vata Vata, and Capricorn is Vata Pitta. Prashara tells us that Saturn has some Pitta in its nature. Likewise with Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. So Gemini is more probably Vata, Libra is Vata Kapha, and Aquarius is Vata Pitta. Cancer, Scorpio we definitely know is going to be Kapha Pitta. And Pisces is Kapha Kapha, and the moon rules Cancer, and it has some Vata in its nature, and especially if the moon is devoid of light. It's got more Vata in its nature. So Kapha is going to be, or Cancer is going to be Kapha Vata. Okay, any questions?
There is a question in the chat. I'm not sure, Brandan, you have seen or not, but how to predict if the fire sign having watery planet, example is Scorpio ascendant, moon is placed.
You got Scorpio ascendant and I didn't quite get it. The Scorpio ascendant with the moon in Scorpio?
It's just written how to predict if the, yes.
So the moon is a Kapha planet, and it depends whether it's Kapha Vata, the moon. See, because it's so changeable, the moon is very changeable. And that changeability is going to be more expressed in the moon when it's devoid of light. But the changeability that's in that moon is going to be an expression of Vata dosha. But the moon is a watery planet, and it is primarily Kapha, especially if it's a full moon. So Scorpio is a Kapha Rashi. It's ruled by Mars, therefore it's Kapha with a tendency towards Pitta dosha. And so it's going to increase the Kapha element if the moon is in Scorpio. You see, especially with full moon. Right? Does that make sense?
It does.
So
Devesh, your question has been answered. Do you have a still additional question?
Yeah, I'm happy to take any additional questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine because moon is debilitated. But my thing is that if fiery sign having the watery planet, and sometimes it's a yoke karak, so in that case, it's still the disease will happen, or it will be reduced.
Will what be reduced?
Yeah, if we take Aries and moon as the ascendant placed in Aries, if we have Aries ascendant and moon is placed in the Aries, so what will be the happen? I mean, the body will be too much okay or fit, or it will be diseased.
Well, so the moon is going to take on the quality of the sign that it's expressing itself through, right? And Aries is a fire sign. So this is why the moon in Aries can be very impulsive, can be fiery, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's going to give rise to those, it can be irritable, can be impatient, and these are all Pitta dosha qualities, right? But at the same time, it's going to have some of that emotional softness of the moon. So it's a Pitta Kapha kind of idea. Right?
Yeah, okay, okay. So you meant to say that even we have to consider the Rashi mainly, even though if planet
you have
planet
to consider both.
Okay, okay.
You have to consider both. And yeah, and then you need to consider what's happening the moon in the Navamsha.
Okay.
To see what kind of influences are going on in the Navamsha to that moon. Because your moon could be aspected by, the moon could be Aries in the first house, but it could be aspected by 3 malefics in the Navamsha. Or it could be aspected by 2 or 3 benefics in the Navamsha. So that's going to change the quality of that moon. Okay, so we'll get to some cases here in a moment where we'll walk through some of the ways in which we might interpret a chart. Now, Agni is a very important concept in Ayurveda. And one of the first things we do in the practice of Ayurveda is we work with Agni. We want to know the person's constitution, but we also want to know the status of their Agni. Because it's very difficult to correct the constitution if you don't take care of Agni. There are 13 Agnis in this body. There's the central Agni, which is referred to as Japa Agni, which is in the stomach and the small intestine, because that's the main Agni in the body. So, you know, here in the West, we say that 80% of the people have Manda Agni. Manda Agni means slow digestion, which means we're not able to digest the food properly because we're not able to digest the world properly. You see? So I regard our capacity to digest as being an expression of our capacity to digest life, to digest experience. Now, if this Agni isn't working properly, it gives rise to an imbalance in the doshas. It gives rise to what we call amma in the body. When food goes into this body, it first goes into the mouth, and we're meant to chew it properly so that the food gets mixed with all these enzymes, or with the saliva, and there's an enzyme in that saliva, especially for the digestion of carbohydrates. Then the food goes into the stomach. And the food in the stomach is mixed with this hydrochloric acid, this secretion of hydrochloric acid and pepsinogen in the stomach. And the imbalance in your Agni can be either in the stomach or the small intestine. And that's got to be figured out. you've got to figure out where the deficiency is. Now, in anybody's chart, remember, food goes into the body in the second house. That's the food intake. And it leaves the body in the 8th house. So the houses between number 2 and number 8 are very, very important for this whole digestive process. The quality and type of food that you eat is going to be indicated by the planets influencing the second house. Even the kind of taste that you enjoy, or the taste in the foods. Now, if you've got Saturn in the second house, it's very likely that you have a habit of eating foods that are not going to be good for your constitution. Or if you've got malefics in your second house, you may be negligent about the kind of food that you eat, you see? Or you may not masticate the food properly, you see, in the mouth before it goes into the stomach. Because if the food isn't properly mixed with the saliva in the mouth, then it's not going to, you're not going to do a good job of its break down the stomach and the small intestine. So the food goes into the mouth and then it goes into the stomach. So this Jyotir Agni in the stomach is very, very important. It can either be balanced, Sama Agni, or it can be too high, too much secretion of hydrochloric acid in the stomach. And we know what that does, right? It can give rise to ulcers because it can burn the protective lining of the stomach, which is referred to as Vedika kapha. Kapha gives rise to protection. So there's a layer on the stomach lining and the stomach wall that protects the stomach from this acid that's always been secreted inside the stomach. So if the Agni is too high, it can destroy the Vedika kapha. And then you begin to get burning sensations in the stomach, and it can give rise to ulceration on the lining of the stomach, right? I remember, just to give you an example, because you want to understand it unless you know from experience or you have some examples. I remember my son, he was about maybe 12, 13 years old. And he had two young friends over for one Saturday. This is many years ago. And I prepared, I thought it was a good, nourishing meal, rice and dal. So I cooked them some rice and dal, some lentils, and some vegetables. That's what I tend to eat. I eat rice, dal, and vegetables. That's my diet. So I feed them. And this little boy, 12, 13, comes running up to me a half an hour later and he said, "I'm hungry." I said, "That's impossible. You just had a big meal. I saw you. You had a huge plate." And his brother was there, and his brother said, "He's always like this." Ah, now I knew what was wrong. You know, Tikshna Agni. Tikshna Agni means that the fire is too strong. So now, I went to the refrigerator and I took out a lump of cheese because I know that cheese is difficult to digest. You see? And so I gave him a big piece of cheese because that cheese is going to be difficult for Agni to break down in the stomach. But what happens is, if your Agni is too strong, it'll turn the food into charcoal in the stomach, metaphorically speaking. Now, think of the stomach as a pot. So when you put food into the stomach, you're putting food into the pot. So what do you need in the pot to cook the food properly? Well, you need the space, which is the pot itself. You need a fire under the pot. That's the hydrochloric acid. But you also need a water content in the pot, because if you don't have water in the pot, the heat is not going to be distributed properly. So what happens is, if your fire is too strong, if Agni is too strong in the stomach, it dries up this water, the watery secretions, burdens them up, and your food turns to charcoal. It's a metaphor, but it works. It's beautiful. The food turns to charcoal, and the person is not getting the bioavailable nutrition from that food. And so such a person may always be hungry. And it can lead to emaciation, loss of weight, all this kind of thing. On the other hand, if Agni is too slow, if there's a slow metabolism, or what we call Manda Agni, then you can have a situation where there isn't enough fire. So what happens to that food in the pot? Is it being cooked properly? No. And so then the stomach hasn't done its job, and the food will sit there. Sometimes people feel that the food just sits there and it's undigested. They're not even hungry 4 hours after the last meal, but you have to go and eat some more food because we're in the habit of doing this. You see, ideally we shouldn't eat until we're hungry. And so because the food isn't digested properly, you get the accumulation of toxins in the body. Undigested food stuff gives rise to this ama. And that ama circulates throughout the body, goes into the various tissues, the joints, and we begin to get pain or some other symptoms. Now, so the ama accumulates in areas of weakness. And then, so even the liver can become overwhelmed, you see? So there's 5 Agnis in the liver, because the food stuff in the liver has to be transformed into the Panchatattvas, into the 5 elements. So these 5 Agnis in the liver are meant to break the food down, so that, because the real building blocks, according to this tradition and this theory, the body is composed of the 5 elements. So the food stuff has to be transformed into the 5 elements in order to be utilized by the body and the mind. So this is why in Ayurveda, we say the first task is to kindle Agni. Even if you do nothing else and you take care of your Agni all your life, you're going to have wonderful health, or you're likely to have very good health. Because now, in the West, you see, you'll hear a lot of people talking about cleansing. And to go on all these cleansing diets and whatnot. And I say, look, that's not going to solve the problem. Because the real problem is Agni, but they don't have such a concept in the West, you see? Yes, we know about hydrochloric acid, we know about enzymes. So enzymes are very common in the West, because when the food goes into the small intestine, it has to be broken down. And what you have in the small intestine is the secretion of enzymes from the pancreas, and you've got the bile from the liver. And so this is how the digestion works. And I like to think, or at least the way I approach Ayurveda, is from the point of view of Agni Ayurveda. I call it Agni Ayurveda. You see, because working with your digestion is crucial. It's very, very important. Now, since I'm on this topic, let me see, how do I can't get over to mine. Blocking me.
We cannot see your screen. Yeah, now we can.
How do I get rid of that bar on top? Oh, no, I got it. Okay, fine, I got it. Now, so I'm going to show you a case here. I'm going to show you a case. I've got two case studies to show you today. Now, so here's a case of Manda Agni. And as I said, there are 4 conditions for this Agni. There's Sama Agni, which is balanced digestion, balanced Agni, powerful digestion. If you've got Sama Agni, you've got a powerful digestion. You've got good health and you've got strong immunity. So we say in Ayurveda that your immunity is equivalent to your Agni, the strength of your Agni. If you got a healthy Agni, you've got strong immunity. Because think of it this way. You see, Mother Nature is very ingenious. So if your food is undigested in the stomach, well, it's unlikely that the small intestine is going to be able to complete the process. It's like a production line. So if it's not well taken care of in the stomach, it's unlikely that the small intestine is going to be able to complete the process, you see, because it's not designed to do the work of the stomach. So what happens is Mother Nature, in all her ingenuity, manifests these critters to complete the process. And that's got to do with the microbiome, you see? So if you've got the wrong type of bacteria in your body, the origin of the problem is very likely to be your Agni. Because when your Agni is well balanced and strong, these critters will instantly demanifest in your body. They'll disappear. The worms and the bad bacteria and whatever else is in there will instantly disappear. And by the way, I think everybody has probably, certainly everybody from India has heard of Triphala. So I have a client and she's got a PhD in some aspect of biochemistry or some of these subjects, microbiology, I believe it is. And so she graduated with her PhD back in 2009. And she came to me one day and she said, Brendan, what should I do research in? And I said, look, see if you can set up a research program on Triphala. Triphala, which is 3 fruits. And so she did a research over the next 5 years, whatever. And she found that Triphala promoted all the good bacteria that give rise to longevity in the microbiome. Right? So this is the ingenuity of these ancient systems. And not alone that, she went on to do some further research on Brahmi and Guduchi and many of these other herbs that are also what we call rasayanas. And she found that they even did a better job of promoting the good bacteria and promoting the microbiome, because those herbs influence the mind, the brain. We know that brandy is outstanding for the brain. And now all the research is coming out telling us that about this relationship between the microbiome and the brain. Get the idea? So you could say that your brain and the functioning of your brain is related to this Agni. And this is why Agni is so important. Now, Vishama Agni is an irregular Agni. Sometimes you want a good meal and then you can't eat it all. The next time you sit down to your meal and you've no appetite, it's irregular, it's erratic. And very often Vata people have this kind of problem. If there's a strong Vata expression in the constitution, Vata people have this kind of problem. And then Tikshna Agni, Chatur Agni is increased, always hungry. I give you a case of that young boy. It can give rise to inflammatory conditions, gastritis, colitis, diarrhea, hypoglycemia. Very often it's seen in pitta, in cases of a pitta imbalance, and particularly a pitta vata. So Manda Agni, so slow Agni, difficult digesting food, heaviness and dullness, depression, weight gain, lethargy, depression. And it often corresponds to a kapha imbalance. You can change your psychological outlook by treating Agni alone, right? If you're depressed, the problem is in your gut, most likely. And there's enough new research coming out in the scientific fields to support this notion. But Ayurveda has been telling us this for centuries. Now, let's take a look at this chart. Now, the question is, how do we make an assessment of the constitution? So here we have a case, we've got Scorpio Lagna, right? We've got Scorpio Lagna. The Lagna Lord Mars is in the 12th house. Now, have you ever heard of Rashi Drishti? There's
Yes.
Graha Drishti and Rashi Drishti. Prashara tells us about this Drishti in one of his early chapters of Briha Prashara Horishatra. Right? Now, you see, the way to distinguish between these two drishtis is this. Think of your constitution as a building, but you're living inside this building. Now, the question is, the building has its structure. It has its nature because it was built that way. That's Rashi Drishti. But you live inside this building and your attitude and your mind will change from day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year, living inside this building, inside this house, let's say. Because your attitude back when you were 20 years old is very different than your attitude when you're 50 years old. And particularly if your Agni became Manda Agni. Now you got a bad attitude. You see? So the idea is, I look at this Drishti on the Lagna, Rashi Drishti to determine your constitution. So you've got the sun. So with Rashi Drishti, the fixed signs are all aspected by the cardinal signs except the adjacent one. Now, it makes total sense. Let me tell you why. Because the Lagna here is a water sign. Now, we know that anybody's body, anybody's constitution, is more than water. All these 5 elements have to be are functioning in your constitution. So we've got an earth sign. The sun and Mercury are in an earth sign. They're aspecting that lagna by Rashi Prishti. You got a fire sign. So there's a fire element involved in your constitution. And there's another water element involved in your constitution. So you've got Cancer is aspecting Scorpio, you've got Aries aspecting Scorpio, and you've got Capricorn aspecting Scorpio. Right? So Scorpio is a copper Rashi because it's a copper Rashi because it's primarily got aspect from Cancer. It's also got an aspect from Aries and an aspect from Capricorn. So the sun is aspecting. The sun and Mercury are aspecting that lagna. The sun is going to increase the pitta. So we could say that this person has a pitta kapha constitution. Scorpio is a kapha Rashi primarily. Secondary pitta, because the sun is aspecting, it's a pitta kapha. It makes a primary pitta. So here we've got a pitta kapha constitution. Now we want to get some indication as to what Agni is doing here. And we want to know whether it's going to be the Agni in the stomach or in the small intestine. Right? Now, look at the 5th house. The 5th house is the stomach. What planets do you see there?
Saturn and Venus and Rahu.
And Rahu, right. So we've got 2 Tamasic planets. 2 big Tamasic Vata Dosha planets. Rahu and Shani, because Rahu is Bhat Shani. Rahu is like Shani. And so, is it causing problems in the stomach? Absolutely. So, the idea here is that this person suffers from Manda Agni. So, we know that Saturn and Rahu are Badaks. They're Badaks, they cause obstruction. Wherever they're placed, they cause obstruction. They're natural Badaks, rather, to rule the sign of Aquarius. And Aquarius is the natural ruler of the 11th house. And the 11th house has got to do with the fulfillment of your goals, desires, and ambitions. And Saturn's job and Rahu's job is to obstruct you. Right? So, now the 6th house. Is the 6th house weak or strong? What's the 6th house aspected by?
The Ascendant Lord Mars.
Mars.
By its own
Ascendant.
Lord, Mars. It's aspected by its own Lord, this planet Mars, who's also the Lagna Lord. You see? So, the idea is that we would not expect that the small intestine is the issue in this case. Small intestine is not the issue. It's the stomach. Because whenever you're treating somebody, when it comes to this Agni business, you have to determine whether it's the stomach or the small intestine that's the source of the problem. Because if you don't treat the right one, you don't get the right results. You don't get results. You've got to be able to make the judgments. Now, generally, in Ayurveda, you see, we do this by asking questions, and we do it by feeling the pulse. But here, I'm giving you an example. Look, the sixth house or the fifth house is also the liver. I'm not going into Varga charts here. I'm trying to get a point across. I'm not going into the Navamsha. I'm not going into the Kaulika. I'm not going into the Trimshamsha, D6 and D30. We don't need to do that just yet. This is not what this class is about. I want to show you using very basic analysis how you might approach looking at somebody's chart, taking these concepts, looking at Agni and looking at the constitutional type. Looking at Agni is extremely important. Now, the other thing, you see, the day you were born is called the Barra Lord. In my last lecture, I went over the Pancham. And the day you're born, the Lord of the day that you were born is called the Barra Lord. The strength of that planet has a lot got to do with your Agni, because the sun is the Lord of the days of the week. The sun is the natural ruler of the days of the week. The sun governs the days of the week. So the Lord of the day of the week that you were born, the placement of that Lord, the strength of that Lord, afflictions to that Lord will determine a great deal about your Agni and your health and your predisposition to having health problems as well. Here it's the moon. This person was born on a Monday. It's the moon. Now, when it comes to Agni, the moon is a watery planet. It's not a fiery planet, right? So it dampens things down a little bit, but it is exalted. It is increasing in light. So that does give some protection. If the planet is in a Dushtana, like if the planet is in 6, 8, or 12, the Barra Lord is in 6, 8, or 12, that's going to give rise to problems with Agni. Now, so the main point here is that we got these two guys here causing trouble. Saturn and Rahu causing trouble. And Jupiter is the Lord of the fifth house. Jupiter has to disposit those, and he's conjoined Ketu, an aspect by Saturn, the liver. The fifth house is also the liver. So where I'm going here is that the liver also needs to be treated. Get the idea? Because there's some sluggishness in the liver as well. Or there's some issues there with the liver. And I'm talking about functional problems. I'm not necessarily talking about pathological problems. But functional problems can become pathological problems. We're talking about the function of the stomach. We're talking about the function of the liver. And this person has been in the Saturn Dasha from October 2012 to October 2031. Now that should be enough to tell you that there's a problem in that region of the body, right? Even if you never approach this from the point of view of these ideas. That Saturn is on the Rahu-Ketu axis. Saturn is the natural significator of immunity and your health. Disease, you might say. Chronicity. Okay. Now let's move on to another case. Any questions about this case?
Yes, Brendan, there was a question in the chat from Devesh saying for the Leo ascendant, Saturn at the 5th house is a Mand Agni or it's a Trishna Agni?
Say that again now.
It said for Leo ascendant, Saturn at 5th house, will that be a Mand Agni or Tiksha Agni?
Well, Saturn is going to cause problems in the 5th house. He's going to cause problems to the stomach and problems. And Saturn generally obstructs. Saturn is a slow planet. You see the idea? Saturn is a slow planet and Saturn is a cold planet. What's he going to do to the fire? See? He's going to block it. He's going to block the secretions or reduce them in some way or dry them up. You see, Saturn is a cold, dry planet, Vata dosha. Whereas the stomach is a warm, wet environment.
So Jupiter's aspect on this 5th house won't make a difference?
Yeah, it's Jupiter's aspect is wonderful, but the problem is that Jupiter despises these guys. You see, it may prevent the person having some serious illness, potentially. But if it's not taken care of, it'll give rise to problems. And spices, all you need is spices, but you have to know how to use the spices. See, the question is, which spices do you use? Use the wrong spices, you don't get the right result.
So Brendan, there is a generic question in the J. The J is asking that what are the diseases associated with Saturn Dasha? So I'm not sure you want to take the question or not.
What's associated with Saturn Dasha?
Diseases associated with Saturn Dasha.
In this chart or in any chart?
I think it's in any chart.
Saturn is an extreme Vata dosha planet. Right? He is the ultimate expression of Vata dosha. Vata dosha, it is said in the Ayurvedic literature, is responsible for 80 chronic diseases. Pitta dosha is responsible for 40 chronic diseases, and Kapha dosha is responsible for 20 chronic diseases. This is Shani. This is Saturn. He's going to cause obstruction to whatever part of the body he's influencing. The obstruction can be the flow of your digestive fire. It can be, and remember, fire is really chemistry. It's an aspect of the chemical interaction that's taking place in that part of the body. So we have to think about it as chemistry. The fire heats up the pot. So Saturn causes fear and anxiety because he gives rise to the experience of death. And we become deadly scared that we're going to die and that we have some terrible disease. Some people are always anxious about their health and their disease condition. This is Vata dosha. So we have to work with Vata dosha, and we have to increase Agni, or we have to take care of Agni, and we have to see where Shani is placed in the chart, see what houses he's aspecting, see what other planets he's aspecting. Right? And that depends on the strength of Saturn. If Saturn is very strong, he causes more problems. So now let me show you another case here. This is a case of Parkinson's disease. Now, everybody's heard of Parkinson's disease. It's but I took this definition so that we're clear on our terminology. So, and bear in mind what we covered about Vayu Tattva and Vata dosha. Parkinson's disease is a long-term degenerative disorder of the central nervous system that mainly affects the motor system, the motor function. The symptoms usually emerge slowly, and as the disease worsens, non-motor symptoms become more common. The most obvious early symptoms are tremor, rigidity, slowness of movement, and difficulty with walking. Cognitive and behavioral problems may also occur with depression, anxiety, and apathy. Well, everything in there is about the dosha. It's almost a perfect description of Vata dosha when it's deranged. Because Vata dosha has a huge affinity for the nervous system, and Vayu Tattva is all about this movement business. This body has to move. It's in a constant state of motion. And now they know that Parkinson's disease is a result of death of some of the cells in a part of the brain called the substantia nigra. It's in the midbrain, and it leads to a dopamine deficit. Now, so this person was diagnosed in the Vimshotri Dasha of Mercury Rahu, and the symptoms can be much worse in Mercury Saturn in 2018. Now, so the first thing we want to do here is we want to examine the Lagna. We want to get some feeling as to what the constitution is. Now, again, I'm using the Rashi Drishti. Raha Drishti is what puts you out of balance. Rashi Drishti is the structure of your constitution. But from Dasha to Dasha, you've got these certain planets aspecting your Lagna or your moon or some other important part of the chart that can cause disturbance from Dasha to Dasha. But fundamentally, I made that analogy with the building. The house is the same. It's just the house becomes worn down with time. There may be a hole in the roof. There may be something wrong with the sewer system. This is what happens, right? Now, so if it is still a house. So we've got Virgo Lagna. And according to Prashara, all the mutable signs aspect the mutable signs. In other words, the fixed signs and the cardinal signs do not aspect the mutable signs. So now look at the planets that are in mutable signs here. So you got Ketu in Sagittarius, you got Mercury in Pisces, And you got Mars, Saturn, and Rahu, a powerful lord there in the sign of Gemini. Right? 3 malefics. Now, this means that all those malefics, now Mercury's in Pisces, debilitated. It's aspecting the Lagna, but from a disadvantaged position, a debilitation position. But Mercury and the Lagna Lord are all aspected by 4 malefics, the worst malefics in the subject. That's a lot of malefic influence. So you've got Mars and Ketu are Pitta dosha, because Ketu is like Mars, and you got Saturn and Rahu, Vata dosha. So you could say that this is a Pitta Vata constitution or a Vata Pitta constitution. And because those 4 malefics are aspecting, there's bound to be some frailty in this constitution. So the person suffers from Parkinson's disease. Now, we have to understand from the point of view of Ayurveda for this lecture, because that's what my lecture is about, we have to understand something about Parkinson's disease from an Ayurvedic point of view. Now, there are 7 dhatus, 7 tissues in this body. The 7 tissues correspond to the 7 planets. We've got Rasa Dhatu, which is ruled by Mercury. We've got Rakta Dhatu, which is ruled by the moon. And the moon here, by the way, is aspected by Mars, powerfully aspected by Mars, the 8th Lord. So this Mars is the Lord of the 8th and the Lord of the 6th. Saturn is the Lord of the 6th, brother. Get the idea? So they're very potent. They're very, very potent disease-causing planets. Now, but we want to see what dhatu Mars and Saturn represent. So Mamsa Dhatu is ruled by Saturn, the muscle. Muscle tissue is ruled by Saturn. Meda Dhatu is ruled by Jupiter, fatty tissue. Asti Dhatu is ruled by the sun, bone tissue. Majja Dhatu, which is the marrow and the nerves, ruled by Mars. Shukra Dhatu is ruled by Venus, or Atharva Dhatu. Now, where I'm going here is that, you see, I often see in the books that Mars rules the muscles. I have a problem with this. Mars is the commander-in-chief of the army. That's the nerves. He's got powerful nerves. Mars is fearless. A strong Mars is fearless, brother, I should say. Because he rules the nerves. Saturn is the worker bee. The muscles do the work. But the muscles are at the command of the nerves. You see, I use Mars as ruler of the nerves. Now, my metaphor for Mars and Saturn together. Mars and Saturn together is a very difficult combination. Or can be for the health. It can make a person very determined and very strong and very successful because of an awful lot of drive. But my metaphor for Mars and Saturn is 2 boxers in a ring. Mars is the red shorts and Saturn is the blue shorts. And neither one of them will go down. They beat the hell out of each other for a full 15 rounds. Get the idea? Because it's called a Yama Yoga. Mars and Saturn together is called a Yama Yoga. And Yama is the god of death. These guys are not afraid to kill. Mars and Saturn. Rahu and Mars together is called a Vijaya Yoga. Victory at any cost. You see? Now, so what we've got here, we've got Mars, which rules Majadhatu, which is the nerve tissue. And we've got Saturn and Rahu, two Vata planets, influencing the nerve tissue. And we know that Saturn and Rahu are very rigid planets anyway, to give rise to rigidity. And they're influencing the Lagna. Mars is, by Graha Drishti, Mars is aspecting that Lagna. So on the Vimshotri Dasha, he came down with symptoms of Mercury, Jupiter. Now, Jupiter, you see, is a Marika for this chart. He's also a Badak because he's the Lord of the seventh house. But he's a Marika. Now, the question we have to ask is Jupiter aspecting that combination. Does he relieve the combination or does he expand the combination? Will Jupiter expand the negativity or will he take away the negativity? This is the idea. This is the question we have to ask. But there's a special dasha that applies because the Lord of the seventh is in, the Lord of the first is in the seventh. It's called Dvi Saptadi Samadasha. And he came down with the symptoms in Jupiter Saturn. It got really bad in Jupiter Saturn. Then he went into Jupiter Rahu, Jupiter Sun, and now he's going into Jupiter Mars in 2022-23. So I think Jupiter Mars is going to be very difficult. Jupiter is in the nakshatra of the eighth lord. It's in Mars's nakshatra. Now we would expect that with those three planets in the sign of Gemini, that there was something fundamentally going on with the lungs and the flow of prana. Right? Because Gemini rules the lungs. That's going to cause an awful lot of constriction in the lungs. So that's my lecture. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I
Yeah,
have a
and
question.
just go ahead, Ranji.
Sorry, sorry.
Go ahead, Ranji.
You mentioned 5 types of Agnis in the liver. Could you please mention them?
Akash, Vayu,
Oh, okay. So
Agni, Jala, and Prithvi.
those are in the liver.
Yeah, because in Ayurveda we said that the food stuff has to be converted into the 5 elements because the body is composed of 5 elements. You see? In Western medicine, it's referred to as liver enzymes. Get the idea? You've heard of liver enzymes. It's one of the things that the doctors look at when they're examining the condition of your liver.
Thank you.
But what are the liver enzymes doing? Enzymes are always got to do with the conversion of something from one form into another.
Hi, Brandan.
This is
Can I
how
ask
this is
about?
how they this is how the ancient rishis imagined it. This is the language they give it.
Go ahead, Marianne.
Yeah, hi, Brandan. When you said that it afflicts the lungs, I'm curious about, are you referring to the fact that because Shani is there with Rahu, and is it, I would just appreciate knowing more about the elemental aspects of it. Are you talking about because it's Shani has that quality of Vayu and it's more like an air element and that gets afflicted with that close conjunction of, or the conjunction of Rahu, Mars, which, you know, heats up the whole situation, and then Saturn being Vayu-esque? And is that, and it's also aspecting the fourth, but it's sixth from the moon? Is that how you're referring to the lungs in terms of this Parkinson's?
No, I'm just saying, see, I always like to look at the natural zodiac.
Okay.
You get so much out of a chart if you look at the natural zodiac in the chart, considering it from the sign of Aries. So,
Okay.
because Gemini rules the lungs and the breathing process.
Oh, I
Right?
see. So you're speaking of sort of the Rashi as being the priority in this case of being the dispositor to all of that energy?
It varies from case to case. There are some cases where you'll see that the natural zodiac works very well, and in other cases it works very well from the Lagna. Now, if you look at the third house in the Lagna, Mars rules the third house in the Lagna, and it's with those guys, with Rahu and Shani. Right?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, thanks. That's, yeah. And I appreciate that distinction of, you could look at it as from the Kalpurush and also.
Purush, yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
there you go. Yeah. I always look at the chart from the point of view. I mean, there's so much to be learned about astrology by just considering the natural zodiac.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah.
Lovely. So
And
any further?
Obviously the knees, when it comes to movement, you can imagine what that's doing to the knees. The motor function.
Yeah. So any further question, you can unmute yourself and you can ask at this time. And I'm receiving a chat in, the message, excellent lecture, Brendan, very clear, very precise. I will also say very interesting presentation, and especially the way you have gone through that basic concept one by one. It was really very clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
If not, we will go more towards closing the session for the day. So since also it's a time when we are closing our conference, so I would like to just point out to the people that there is a feedback which you can see in the chat, the URL for all 3 weekends. It's just that since we are looking for a detailed one, so you will have a couple of links to look into. So please, do provide your feedback. And also, if you want to give a video feedback, I will be holding on for next half an hour and so, and you can just give your feedback and we will record the session. So with that, so thanks a lot, Brandan.
Yeah, Brandan, Rakesh Sharma here. It is good to see you again with such interesting topic and understanding, and I'm very thankful to you for on behalf of Arshi Jyotish, and I think all of us also should thank Meenakshi and Saurabh for their dedication for this, because this requires an enormous effort and enormous time. So everybody should thank Meenakshi and for this unbelievable work she has done. So,
thanks, Vikash. I appreciate
Yes,
it.
Meenakshi, you're our heroine.
Thank you, Rakesh. Thank you, Dr. Marian. I always contribute my thanks to Rani ji when she comes here. I feel that the conference is going on and her beautiful chanting. So it contributing to the Rani ji all the time.
I have nothing to do with it. You've done all the work and you bring all these wonderful expert teachers. Great job, Brendan ji. I just enjoyed the lecture. It was beautiful.
but Rani, you are also able to get up in the morning, 6 o'clock
Yes.
here. Your dedication is also unbelievable, and hope it continues when we do the in-person conference next.
Yeah, I'm planning to come there, Rakeshji.
Okay, good
It's
luck.
just fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much for everything, Nakshiji and Brandan, Rakeshji, Saurabhji. Thank you, and all the teachers, all our speakers. Awesome. Thank you.
So with that, I would also like to let the people know that the next session, which is next conference of the Jyotish, which is coming up, is in the first 2 weeks of June, summer, which we usually do from the 2nd of the June to the 12th of the June. So that's what we are planning so far. We always bring all the Vastu and the Ayurveda with the past, the before or after as well. So looking forward to that. So Raniji, now we'll close the session.
Thank you. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
Thank you, Raniji. Thanks a lot for everyone for joining and giving your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Brandan.
Bye.
Thank you, Minaskaji.
Yeah, thank you, Jitendra. So anyone who would like to give the feedback, I'll be very happy to start with that.